Welcome to our channel, everyone. Before we dive into the final chapters, here's a taste of what awaits at the story's climactic end. Imagine our wounded diplomat standing atop a broken battlement, desperately negotiating peace while hostile forces close in. In an electrifying twist, someone you least expect might save the day or betray everything. Curious about who that might be and how it all plays out? Listen through to the full story to experience every tense moment in astonishing revelation. If you enjoy this tale of bravery, sacrifice, and unexpected alliances, please hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We'd love to share even more thrilling adventures, so ring the notification bell and stay connected. Don't forget to leave a comment below about your favorite characters and where you prefer to listen. Your feedback helps us shape the best possible stories. The day began beneath a bruised sky, veined with clouds of crimson and gold. Thunderous echoes of artillery fire rumbled in the distance, foreshadowing the chaos to come. Corwin, a human combat medic trained under some of Earth's most grueling field conditions, sprinted across the war-torn valley with his medical pack thumping against his back. The terrain was unsteady, marked by jagged stones and the smoldering wreckage of transport vehicles from both sides of the conflict. For years, this area had been a hotspot for skirmishes. But today's devastation was exceptional. The planetary dust, tinged teal from unusual alien minerals, kicked up with every hurried footstep. Overhead, twin suns peeked through ragged clouds, casting irregular beams of light onto a landscape that looked as if it had been ripped apart by cosmic claws. An urgent voice crackled through Corwin's comm device. "Multiple casualties near the forward position. We need a medic immediately." His lungs already burned from exertion, but he forced himself to push harder. He vaulted over a collapsed piece of alien architecture, once part of an outpost built by the Siraxi, the species defending this planet, and landed in a crouch amid swirling dust. A sudden explosion rattled the air, and a column of flame erupted not far behind him. The ground shook so violently that Corwin had to steady himself against a bent steel beam. Ever since the Zavori Empire launched its surprise offensive, the precarious alliance of Siraxi forces and humans had been struggling to hold each inch of ground. The Siraxi, tall and imposing beings with scaled exoskeletons and formidable strength, had never before requested human assistance. Yet, the war had escalated well beyond their expectations. Human specialists, both combatants and medics, were deployed to help stem the tide of the Zavori's relentless attacks. None of the Alliance could have anticipated the advanced minefields the Zavori planted in hidden routes supposedly secured for peace negotiations. As Corwin crested a crumbled embankment, he witnessed a scene that made his heart clench. A tight cluster of Siraxi soldiers surrounded a prone figure. Their expressions, eyes narrowed, scales standing on end, hinted at horror and despair. Near them loomed Commander Korov, a Siraxi officer known for his stoic composure, but at this moment his mandibles twitched in panic. Cradled in the commander's arms lay Sarala, a diplomatic envoy of great importance to the galaxy-wide peace talks. Her leg was gone below the knee, ripped away by one of the newly planted Zavori mines. Blackish-red blood seeped into the dusty ground, and the tattered edges of her once elegant diplomatic robes hung limply. Her vibrant azure scales looked dull and covered in grime, while her raven-colored hair stuck to her forehead, drenched in sweat. Corwin's gut twisted at the sight, yet training took over. He sprinted the last few meters and dropped to his knees beside Sarala. Commander Korov's voice was thick with urgency. "She's bleeding out. Our Siraxi med pods can't handle sudden amputations out here. She needs help we can't provide." The fear in the commander's tone betrayed his usual iron composure. Before Corwin could even respond, Sarala's eyes fluttered open, revealing large violet irises, glassy with pain and shock. She struggled to focus on his face. Drawing a deep breath, Corwin steadied his trembling hands. He rummaged through his medical pack, locating analgesics and a portable field tourniquet. The intense stench of burnt flesh and the acrid tang of chemicals from recent explosions threatened to overwhelm him, but he swallowed hard and pressed forward. "I'm Corwin," he said softly, injecting Sarala with the painkiller. "I'm here to keep you alive, understood?" Sarala's lips twitched, perhaps an attempt at a nod or a faint smile, as the medication began to dull her senses. Commander Karov gently laid Sarala down so Corwin could apply a makeshift tourniquet. The device hissed as it cinched around the remnants of her thigh. Blood flow reduced, but time was ticking. Sarala would go into shock if he couldn't stabilize her. Around them, debris-littered ground gave way to coughing soldiers and pungent smoke. Several Siraxi warriors formed a shaky perimeter, weapons at the ready for any sign of a Zavori counterattack. Each second felt like a lifetime as Corwin worked. As the painkillers dulled her agony, Sarala managed to speak in a whisper that only Corwin could hear. All my training, my entire life, was about forging peace between species. She paused, breath ragged. Now, a single mine might end that dream. Despite her labored breathing, there was a determined gleam in her violet eyes, revealing the stubborn resolve typical of diplomats who often negotiated on tense front lines. Corwin's mind raced through his mental inventory of field supplies. He had a standard advanced trauma kit, which any well-prepared combat medic carried. But he also possessed something revolutionary, a prototype synthetic limb designed by human engineers for dire combat scenarios. It was experimental, rarely tested outside controlled environments. Most war zones offered no time or sterility to implant such advanced prosthetics. Moreover, this limb was calibrated for human physiology, not Siraxi. But if it could potentially keep Sarala alive, wasn't it worth trying? In every major conflict, humans and other species have found that necessity breeds groundbreaking solutions. Here, on a scorching battlefield, that principle meant the difference between life and death. Corwin realized that if he didn't do something drastic, Sarala might die or lose her chance to fulfill her vital diplomatic role. Looking up, Corwin locked eyes with Commander Kurov. I have an experimental synthetic leg in my pack. It's risky because it's engineered for humans, but if I can adapt it to Siraxi biology on the fly, there's a chance I can save her. Kurov's mandibles parted in disbelief. That technology, no, that procedure hasn't been sanctioned for use on Siraxi. Our bodies reject untested grafts. And you want to do it here, on raw ground, with dust and blood everywhere? Corwin's face hardened with resolve. Your med pods aren't equipped for this. I am. If we don't try, she'll bleed out long before we reach a hospital. Our only shot is to do it now. Cyrilla's trembling hand gripped the edge of Corwin's jacket, and her violet eyes looked straight into his. I trust you, she mouthed, voice too faint for anyone else to hear. That simple gesture pulled tight on Corwin's heart. Standing still were the allied Siraxi troops, uncertain about letting a human perform such an unorthodox procedure. But time was short. Commander Kurov glanced at his wounded diplomat, at his anxious warriors, and then back at the medic who was rummaging through a small steel case of instruments and prosthetic components. The commander's scaled brow furrowed, but he finally nodded curtly. Do it, human. But if she dies... His threat went unfinished, lost in the hush that settled over the battered troops as they made space for Corwin's desperate operation. Corwin laid out a small surgical cloth on the closest relatively clean patch of ground. He disinfected the area around Sarala's stump as thoroughly as the environment allowed, battling swirling dust and the acrid tang of scorched metal. The tourniquet had slowed her blood loss, but her breathing was shallow and her skin temperature was rapidly declining. The field monitors attached to her chest beeped intermittently, flashing red signals for danger. Commander Kurov barked at his soldiers in their guttural Siraxi dialect. 4 troopers immediately moved to form a defensive perimeter around Corwin and Sarala, their scaled forms bristling with tension. They knew the Zavori might return at any moment. This battlefield had become a labyrinth of hidden mines and roving enemy patrols. Each explosion, each staccato burst of plasma fire in the distance, reminded them of how precarious their position was. Yet no one flinched from their post. They understood that Cyrill's survival was paramount, for she held critical diplomatic codes and intelligence that could pave the way to a long-awaited peace agreement. Corwin worked methodically, first cleaning the jagged edges of the severed limb and carefully trimming away any necrotic tissue. The raw wound made him grimace. Siraxi anatomy had similarities to humans, but also stark differences, such as deeper muscle layering and scale ridges that were sensitive to touch. He administered additional analgesics specifically configured for alien physiology, though the dosage was guesswork. Standard protocols did not exist for this emergency. From a steel case, he retrieved the prototype synthetic leg, a sleek device with matte gray plating and a flexible joint system built to mimic human biomechanics. Already, it was an imperfect fit for the Siraxi bone structure. Corwin had to manually adjust the interior socket, reprogram the Neuralink sensor, and even improvise a partial exoskeleton piece to accommodate the scales around Sarala's thigh. In a sterile operating room, such modifications might take hours of precise measurement. Corwin had minutes, at best. Trust is rarely given freely between species that have spent eons evolving on different worlds. But in a crucible of warfare, where lives hang by a thread, alliances can crystallize swiftly. Sarala might have only known Corwin for a few fleeting moments, but life or death situations forge deeper connections than months of diplomatic banquets ever could. When Corwin initiated the first wave of nano-bonding material, Sarala let out a muffled scream, instantly biting down on a piece of cloth to stifle it. Her body arched, muscles rebelling against the invasive graft. Commander Kurov growled low in his throat, looking ready to intervene, but Corwin gestured for him to stay back. "She's strong," he yelled above the moan of the wind and the distant blasts. "I need her conscious a bit longer, so the interface can map her nerve signals." Sarala shuddered, her breath coming in ragged bursts, tears lining the edges of her brilliant eyes. Despite the agony, she jerked her chin in affirmation. "Do what you must," she hissed, each word a labor. Corwin nodded, swallowing his sympathy to focus on the procedure. He threaded slender filaments along her thigh, connecting them to the nerves that remained intact. The neural couplers hummed with faint light as they synchronized. All the while, the earth rumbled with new artillery strikes, and ash-laden winds whipped across the field. Just as Corwin was about to attach the last coupler, a sudden whining noise sliced through the chaotic background. Overhead, a low-flying Xavery gunship skimmed the horizon, its underside bristling with sensor arrays. The group of Siraxi soldiers braced for an imminent assault, weapons raised and eyes locked on the vessel. Corwin fought the urge to abandon the procedure and dive for cover. If he stopped now, Sarala's neural interface might misalign, making the prosthetic permanently useless, or worse, sending her into fatal shock. Commander Kurov roared in Siraxi, giving the signal to hold their ground. Plasma bursts lit the night sky as the Allied troopers fired at the approaching ship. Burning arcs sizzled through the air, momentarily forcing the Xavery gunship to bank away. Corwin seized the small window, hand trembling, to clamp the final coupler onto Sarala's severed nerves. He felt her entire body tense beneath him, as if lightning had shot through her bones. The connection was made, now to see if it held. When the Xavery ship swung back for another pass, smoke columns and swirling dust made it hard to aim. Its cannon spat fiery lines into the ground, but the Siraxi squad dashed and strafed skillfully, evading the brunt of the attack. Corwin pressed a button on his portable control pad, initiating the prosthetic's synchronization cycle. Sarala's new leg gave a subtle jerk. Her face contorted with a mixture of horror and wonder as alien neural signals tried to communicate with a device engineered for a human body. Throughout the annals of galactic history, different species have each endured plagues, wars, and technological leaps. Humans learned to persevere by repurposing old methods. The Siraxi honed their discipline to carve a civilization in harsh terrain. By merging these traits in a single battlefield procedure, Corwin and Sarala were enacting a silent rebellion against the constraints of biology, culture, and centuries of isolation. Corwin hovered over Sarala, using his device to calibrate voltage thresholds and synaptic patterns in real time. "I need you to try moving your foot," he said gently, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. She grimaced, sweat matting her raven hair, and focused on the limb. At first, nothing happened. Then, with excruciating slowness, the foot's articulated digits twitched, curling inward. Sarala gasped sharply, her body recoiling from the raw shock of sensation in a place that should no longer exist. I can feel something," she managed, voice laced with disbelief. Her words sent a quiet wave of relief through Corwin, even as the gunship's droning intensified. Commander Kurov barked new orders. "We must evacuate. The Xavery are mobilizing ground forces." Two Siraxi troopers dashed forward, carrying a portable shield generator that emitted a faint blue dome around their position, deflecting some of the stray blasts. Corwin nodded at Kurov, then turned back to Sarala. "We have to move you now. If we stay here, we're finished." She offered a strained nod, eyes half-lidded from pain and exhaustion, but still resolute. Carefully, Corwin signaled two Siraxi soldiers to help lift her. The newly attached prosthetic wobbled, sending tremors through Sarala's body. He tried to soothe her. Easy. The interface is still adjusting. They managed a hasty withdrawal, ducking behind collapsed debris fields and smoldering craters. Overhead, the gunship circled, but a combination of swirling dust and the Siraxi's return fire kept it from aligning a perfect shot. Eventually, it veered off to hunt elsewhere, trailing fiery contrails in the bruised sky. Only then could Corwin breathe a small sigh of relief. Cyril was alive, albeit severely weakened. Her presence, though, was crucial. Without her, the fragile negotiations aimed at stopping this war would certainly fail. They regrouped in the ruins of an abandoned Siraxi communications outpost, huddling amid shattered consoles and half-collapsed walls. A battered holomap flickered in the center of the room, revealing the rough topography of the region. It was riddled with blinking red markers, confirmation that the Zavori had deployed mines and patrols all along the route to the peace summit. Commander Kurov glowered at the holomap, mandibles pinched in thought. We were assured safe passage. Either the Zavori lied from the start, or someone betrayed our coordinates. His pointed gaze swept the room, causing his own troops to shift uncomfortably. Even though tensions were high, it was clear that only a cunning or traitorous act could have led them into such a lethal trap. Sirala leaned against a broken console, her new synthetic legs stretched out before her. Corwin had wrapped the stump with a protective membrane, hoping to stave off infection until they reached a better-equipped facility. She tried to flex the leg again, wincing as it responded with stuttering movements. When she caught Corwin watching, she mustered a faint smile. If I focus enough, I can almost believe it's my real leg. Corwin crouched beside her, double-checking her vitals on a handheld device. You're doing incredibly well, given the circumstances. A typical human might take days to adapt to a neural interface this advanced. You seem to be adjusting by the hour. She let out a weak laugh, momentarily ignoring the shrieks of wind through the battered walls. Siraxi physiology has its quirks. Perhaps we're not so different from you after all. Corwin nodded, momentarily entranced by the determination shining in her eyes, an unwavering desire to live, to protect her people, and to bring peace. From across the room, Commander Kurov cleared his throat. Our intelligence suggests the next major Zavori checkpoint lies about 8 kilometers north. We'll need to circumvent it if we have any hope of reaching the summit site. Tapping the holomap, he indicated a longer path that would take them through swampy lowlands marked by no known settlements. It's more dangerous terrain, but we might avoid the main Zavori patrol routes. Corwin surveyed Sorela's leg. The new attachments held, but her body was still raw from the ordeal. Sorela needs rest and some measure of care. If we push her too hard, the prosthetic might malfunction, or her wound could open. Kurov's gaze hardened, but behind that stern look lurked genuine concern. We have no choice. Every moment we delay is another chance for the Zavori to locate us or to strengthen their lines. And if they find Sorela, the entire peace negotiation is doomed. Regardless of species differences or personal grudges, everyone in that battered outpost shared a single, unyielding purpose: to ensure that Sorela survived long enough to deliver the diplomatic codes and to confront the Zavori with the possibility of peace. It was a mission that transcended personal ambition and petty rivalry. Resolved, they formed a plan. The Siraxi scouts, known for their keen night vision, would go ahead to clear a path, while Corwin stayed close to Sorela to monitor her health. Kurov would coordinate from the rear, ensuring no Zavori forces came up behind them. The group steeled themselves for the next leg of this perilous journey, knowing that their pursuit of peace might lead them through even darker corridors of violence. Night fell fast under the planet's twin suns, creating a curious luminescent twilight. The dim glow from the setting suns outlined the jagged remains of war machines, downed gunships, and twisted metal structures. It gave the landscape an otherworldly aura, like the shattered memories of a once peaceful civilization now encased in gloom. As they trekked into the lowlands, thick, marshy ground squelched beneath every footstep, releasing pungent odors of stagnant water and decaying foliage. Sorela leaned on Corwin's arm whenever her synthetic leg faltered. Despite the bleak surroundings, her spirit seemed unbroken. Between pained breaths, she asked about Earth, the oceans, the forests, the cities that gleam beneath a single sun. Corwin provided fragmented descriptions, peppered with odd anecdotes. He spoke of the Renaissance period on Earth, of skyscrapers that touched the clouds, and of food stalls selling an incredible variety of cuisines. Strange details that felt almost trivial amidst the horrors of war, yet they seemed to brighten Sorella's expression. In the line ahead, Commander Kurab and his scouts paused frequently, scanning the darkness with advanced goggles. Once, the lead scout raised a hand in silent warning. Everyone froze. Only the sound of dripping swamp water broke the silence. Then, with a swift gesture, Kurab motioned them forward again, apparently safe from immediate threats. Nonetheless, each moment of respite felt tenuous. They navigated around watery sinkholes and clumps of tangled, phosphorescent vines that glowed faintly. One of the Siraxi troopers muttered in an undertone about encountering carnivorous plants and venomous wildlife. Corwin, busier with Sorella's condition, occasionally glanced around uneasily, but they had little choice except to continue. Despite the danger, the route spared them from the main Zavori outposts and from the lethal minefields known to be scattered on higher ground. Corwin called for a halt when Sorella began to flag badly, her breathing ragged. The group settled in a small clearing under the twisted canopy of an enormous bog tree whose drooping branches provided partial shelter. Commander Kurab reluctantly agreed to a few hours' rest. Siraxi guards fanned out, creating a protective circle, while Corwin checked Sorella's vitals by the dim light of a portable lamp. To his relief, the prosthetic remained stable, and her vital signs, though precarious, had not plummeted. Yet her entire body trembled from stress and exertion. Corwin prepared a nutrient injection, customized to Siraxi biology as best he could, and administered it via a hypodermic spray. Sorella hissed at the cold sensation that coursed through her bloodstream. "You're oddly gentle," she whispered, "for someone who's had to cut into my bones." He chuckled softly, seating himself beside her, and "I wasn't always like this. I used to be more naive. Being thrust into war zones changes people." The murmur of night creatures enveloped them, and for a moment a hush passed, a fragile peace in the midst of conflict. "It's strange to find quiet here," Sorella murmured. "In my line of work, silence was rare. Diplomacy is full of speeches, negotiations, and urgent pleas." Her voice softened, "But I was prepared for anything if it meant bridging species boundaries." She winced slightly, touching the bandages around her upper thigh. The reality of bridging with an experimental synthetic limb had proven to be more literal than she could have ever anticipated. Corwin placed a reassuring hand over hers, the warmth of their exchange a stark contrast to the damp chill of the swamp. Despite the chaos that surrounded them, a delicate tether had formed between them, built on shared risk and an extraordinary medical gamble. Dawn arrived unceremoniously, with pale greenish light filtering through the towering vines in the midst of the swamp. Corwin quickly examined Sorella's prosthetic connection. Satisfied that it remained functional, he motioned for the group to push on. The next segment of their route would lead them out of the lowlands and up a steep escarpment, a challenging climb even under ideal conditions. They advanced cautiously. Every once in a while, the ground quivered with distant bombardments, reverberating from battlefields hundreds of kilometers away. The war was far from contained to their location. It spanned continents, with countless lives hanging in the balance. For Sorella and Corwin, though, the world had condensed to a singular focus: reach the summit, stay alive, and ensure the peace talks could still happen. A flock of alien avian creatures erupted from the treetops, their squawks echoing in the hazy air. The commotion caused a few Siraxi soldiers to raise weapons, but they soon realized no threat was present. Nonetheless, the suddenness kept everyone on edge, adrenaline spiking. Even Sorella clutched Corwin's arm tightly, the reflex revealing how close tension bubbled beneath her diplomatic calm. Soon the marshy terrain gave way to rocky footpaths. The shift felt abrupt. One moment they were slogging through mud, the next they found themselves navigating slippery, moss-laden stone. Sorella tested her prosthetic on the uneven ground. It wobbled, but each step grew more confident. In pockets of conversation, Corwin explained minor details about calibrating the limb's servos and how it converted her neural impulses into mechanical action. Sorella listened intently, determined to master control over the device that had now become part of her very identity. Halfway up the first ridge, Commander Kurov halted, signifying that something was amiss. Two scouts returned with grim expressions. Zavori patrols are not far. Maybe a dozen strong, possibly more, one murmured. Kurov grimaced, motioning for them to find alternative paths. We cannot risk a confrontation, he hissed in the Saraxi dialect. The group veered to a narrower, more winding route that clung to the edge of the ridgeline. Without warning, plasma fire streaked across the path, impacting the rock face mere meters ahead. The explosion sent razor-sharp fragments flying, one slicing across a Saraxi trooper's shoulder. The soldier roared in pain, dropping to one knee. Corwin instinctively moved to help, but was met by a volley of covering fire from the other Saraxi. Sarala ducked behind a boulder, her leg trembling from the sudden jolt of movement. They were pinned, Savori soldiers, humanoid but with chitinous plating over much of their bodies, advanced with methodical precision, their weapons humming ominously. Commander Kurov barked commands, rallying his squad to return fire. Energy blasts lit the plateau in rapid succession, scorching the rocks and raising steam from any lingering dew. Corwin stayed low, pulling out a compact medical kit and motioned for Sarala to inch closer. We need to keep pressure off your leg. Stay behind me. She nodded, breathing heavily. Despite the gunfire overhead, she remained alert, determined not to be a liability. Corwin respected her bravery. While most would have retreated inward after losing a limb, she was still thinking tactically, scanning the ridgeline for any vantage point that might help them slip away from the firefight. Another blast rocked the ledge, causing the stone beneath their feet to crack and crumble. Corwin and Sarala scrambled to regain balance, nearly tumbling off the edge. In a lucky twist, the fragmented ledge provided unexpected cover, forming a rocky alcove that shielded them from direct fire. Commander Kurov signaled from a distance, urging them to circle around while he and the Saraxi troopers diverted the Zavori's attention. Corwin glanced at Sarala. We can't leave Kurov's group alone. A pang of guilt tugged at him for even considering an escape route. However, Sarala pressed her lips into a thin line. They're doing what they must. The summit depends on me reaching the negotiation site. If we stay, we all risk capture. Her words hung in the air like a moral ultimatum. Just a day earlier, the idea of leaving an allied commander behind might have seemed unthinkable. But duty was a harsh master, and Sarala's diplomatic mission was crucial to stopping a planetary bloodbath. Nodding reluctantly, Corwin helped her maneuver through the narrow alcove. Loose rubble rained around them each time the battle above intensified. They emerged on the far side of the ridgeline, breath catching at the steep slope below. It wasn't a straight drop, but close enough to make any misstep fatal. Sarala tested her prosthetic on the angled rock, wincing at the uncertain traction. Carefully, Corwin guided her downward, step by painstaking step. The roar of battle receded behind them, replaced by the rushing wind as it whipped through the canyon. About halfway down, Sarala lost her footing on a loose stone. She let out a startled cry as her new leg buckled. Corwin lunged, catching her around the waist before she plunged headlong. Her eyes were wide, heart pounding against his arm. They paused, chest to chest, balanced precariously on the slope. The tension of the moment sparked a shared realization. Life was fleeting. In that instance, all the swirling chaos, the war, the betrayal, the race to preserve peace, faded into the background. Their faces hovered inches apart. Despite the fear etched into Sarala's features, there was also gratitude and a flicker of admiration. A single breath's hesitation, and their emotions ignited in a brief, heated kiss. It felt both frantic and comforting, a promise forged in adversity. Corwin, cheeks flushed, pulled back, scanning the slope. Emboldened, they continued the climb down, carefully navigating around small waterfalls formed by trickling streams. By the time they reached the canyon floor, the sky overhead had lightened again, the second of the planet's suns cresting the horizon in a subdued glow. Exhaustion weighed heavily on both of them, yet they pressed on, determined to put distance between themselves and the firefight above. Emerging from the canyon, they found a winding path through a scrubland dotted with stunted trees and coarse shrubs. A persistent wind moaned across the open plain, as if lamenting the war that had turned this land into a living graveyard. Sarala attempted to maintain an even gait, but the prosthetic still jerked occasionally, sending her stumbling. Corwin steadied her each time, marveling at her resilience. The day stretched on, and the heat under the dual suns intensified. With every passing kilometer, Cyrilla and Corwin felt more vulnerable. Their comm devices crackled intermittently, sometimes picking up bursts of Siraxi or human chatter, but rarely anything coherent. The summit location loomed in their thoughts. It was situated at an ancient Siraxi temple revered for centuries, said to lie at the boundary of three major territories. For the negotiations to have any hope, Sarala needed to be present and deliver a crucial data key stored within a specialized neural implant in her cerebral cortex. By mid-afternoon, they spotted movement on the horizon. At first, Corwin tensed, worried it might be a Zavori patrol, but as they crept closer, they discovered a small band of Siraxi scouts. Relief momentarily swelled until it became clear these scouts bore different insignias, a lesser Siraxi faction not fully aligned with Commander Krov's group. An uneasy standoff ensued when the scouts raised their weapons in alarm at the sight of a blood-spattered human supporting a limping Siraxi diplomat. Sarala raised a shaky hand in greeting. "We come in peace," she said in the formal Siraxi dialect. "I am diplomat Sarala, traveling under directive from the High Council. Please, we need help." Initially, suspicion colored the scouts' eyes, but when they recognized Sarala's name and the significance of her mission, they lowered their weapons. Their leader introduced himself as Farax, a lean Siraxi with elaborate stripes along his scales, indicating possible membership in an ancient warrior clan. Farax's group had also run afoul of Zavori forces, sustaining casualties. They had minimal supplies left. Nevertheless, they offered what little water and rations they could spare. Sarala, leaning against a half-collapsed wall of an abandoned cargo station, accepted the canteen gratefully. Meanwhile, Corwin quietly asked if they had seen any sign of Commander Karov's squad or encountered a route free of Zavori patrols. "Commander Karov still fights near the ridgeline," Farax replied, subdued. "I heard crackling reports of intense clashes. Some say he's pinned, with no chance of rescue." Cyrilla visibly paled, a wave of guilt washing over her. Corwin squeezed her hand, understanding her turmoil. In war, no choice was without cost, yet hearing that Karov was in danger weighed heavily. Regardless, time pressed onward. Sarala's mission was paramount for all Siraxi, including Commander Karov's troops. Without successful peace talks, the entire planet could fall home. Once Farax mapped out a potential route that skirted known Zavori positions, the group prepared to part ways. Sarala voiced her gratitude with formal Siraxi salutes, and Corwin bowed his head respectfully. Before leaving, Farax offered a final piece of advice. "Beware the dead fields. Rumor says the Zavori plant fresh mines each morning. If you must cross that place, do so cautiously or not at all." The warning settled over them like a dark shroud. Mines were the very reasons Sarala's leg had been blown off. Corwin's jaw tightened, recalling the horror of watching her bleed out on that desolate plain. Yet ironically, the route through the dead fields might be the only path left to the temple. The two travelers thanked Farax and moved on, forging a slow but steady pace. By dusk, clouds gathered with an ominous hush, blanketing the sky in heavy purples and grays. Lightning flickered at the edges of the horizon, heralding an approaching storm. Perhaps a cosmic metaphor, Corwin mused, nature raging as violently as any war. With each rolling clap of thunder, the tension between the planet's warring factions seemed to echo in the heavens. They finally reached the outskirts of the dead fields, a wide ashen basin dotted with scraggly vegetation that looked diseased and brittle. Scorch marks and craters covered the land, some fresh, some decades old. Corwin swallowed hard, remembering the lethal mines. Unlike the older style of explosive, these advanced devices were rumored to have adaptive sensors, reacting to varied footprints, energy signatures, or even temperature changes. One misstep could trigger an eruption of metal and flame. Sarala stared across the desolation, her expression mingling fear and determination. "We have no time for detours," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "The summit begins at dawn tomorrow. If we're not there, the Zavori will assume we're either dead or that we've betrayed our commitments." Her new prosthetic glinted in the fading light, a reminder of the personal cost she had already paid. Corwin exhaled slowly, scanning the basin for any hint of a safe path. "We'll move slowly. Let me go first. I have a portable mine detector. It's not foolproof, but it's better than nothing." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, meeting her gaze. "Stay close, but follow exactly in my footsteps." They began a harrowing march, each step measured and deliberate. Corwin used a scanner to detect possible signals, though it screeched with false positives whenever it encountered pockets of metallic debris scattered from past blasts. Each beat made Sorrel's heart jump, the memory of how swiftly a leg could be torn from one's body, an all-too potent warning. Wind whipped sand across their boots, and the distant storm clouds closed in, casting the dead fields in an almost suffocating darkness. Lightning flared again, illuminating jagged wreckage that looked like broken teeth protruding from the earth. By the flickering light, Corwin could see the lines of anxiety etched into Sorrela's face. He wanted to reassure her, to promise safe passage, but war had taught him never to offer promises he wasn't certain he could keep. They reached a crater about halfway across, the edges still warm from a recent detonation. Here, the ground was soft, blackened by scorched minerals. Corwin's scanner went wild with overlapping signals. He halted, holding up an arm to stop Sorrela. Their eyes met in grim understanding. This was a nest of mines. Suddenly, a flurry of movement came from behind a bent metal plate. Corwin tensed. Had the Zavori beaten them here? He raised his makeshift sidearm, a basic kinetic pistol he'd taken from a fallen soldier earlier. Emerging from behind the debris was no soldier, but a small, wounded creature, vaguely reminiscent of a reptile with leathery wings and luminous eyes. It squeaked in distress, flailing in what looked like the aftershock of an explosion. Sorrela, despite her own peril, took a step forward. "It's just an animal," she murmured. "Don't scare it." Her voice was as soothing as she could manage. The creature limped closer, leaving tiny footprints in the scorched earth. Corwin's heart twisted. The beast was probably just another casualty of the unending violence. Softening his stance, he lowered the pistol, letting the creature approach. Yet that moment of compassion carried a fatal risk. The trembling little reptile stepped onto a buried device, and a faint click resounded through the unnatural hush. Corwin's stomach dropped. In a split second, he thrust Sorrela behind him, shielding her body with his own. Then the explosion came, a fiery shockwave that tore through the night, blasting metal shards in all directions. The impact sent Corwin and Sorrela sprawling into the dust. For a terrifying instant, Corwin believed the worst had befallen them, that another limb or another life was lost in a swirl of blood and fire. But when he rolled onto his back, gasping, he realized the blast was less direct than it could have been. A crater smoldered barely a dozen meters away, churning fresh smoke into the swirling wind. Ears ringing, Corwin scrambled to Sorrela's side, eyes searching her body for any sign of injury. She lay face down, her prosthetic leg partially buried under rubble. Panicked, Corwin tore at the debris. Sorrela coughed, pushing herself up on her elbows. Blood trickled from a shallow cut on her forehead, but as far as he could tell, she was otherwise intact. Relief coursed through him so powerfully that tears pricked his eyes. He gently pulled her upright, ignoring the wave of dizziness that threatened to topple him. Sorrela's gaze swept over him, raw concern in her violet eyes. You're not hurt?" He patted his torso, noticing a few superficial burns and scratches, but no life-threatening injuries. "I'm okay. The mine must have partially detonated or been triggered incorrectly. We got lucky." Far in the distance, thunder rumbled again, resonating like the wrath of the cosmos bearing witness to their near tragedy. They regrouped, shaken but resolute. With even greater caution, they continued onward, the temple's location now only an hour or two away. That knowledge was the lone flame guiding them through darkness. With each painstaking step, they reaffirmed a shared promise. No matter how many mines lay ahead, how many Xavier patrols roamed the night, they would not give up. Because at the heart of their determination beat a singular, unyielding truth: peace was worth any price. The final leg of this story promises heart-pounding action and poignant revelations. As the summit nears, tensions skyrocket. Hidden enemies emerge, morale wavers, and our heroes must grapple with impossible decisions. A final standoff will test every bond they've forged along the way. Yet a single moment of selflessness could change the fate of entire worlds. Will the vow to secure peace triumph over personal sacrifice? Or will the galaxy spiral into deeper chaos? There's only one way to find out. Immerse yourself in the conclusion and brace for revelations that may forever alter how you see these characters. Once again, subscribe and join our ever-growing community. We want to hear your thoughts on the plot twists. Do they surprise or delight you? Let us know where you tune in from, and feel free to share your most memorable scenes in the comments below.